Now, French President Emmanuel Macron has asked his Prime Minister to hold talks with political leaders and demonstrators in an attempt to calm tensions that have caused the worst riots in years to rock French capital. The decision was taken in crisis talks led by French President a day after the riots left scores of people injured and caused widespread destruction. The minister said that the government was not ruling out any option, even though they clarified that there was no discussion on imposing a state of emergency in the crisis talks. Reports earlier suggested that the government was mulling imposition of emergency to prevent a report and a repeat of the riots which took place. The government will brief the French Senate on Tuesday about the riots and the measures being taken to prevent its recurrence. Before the emergency meeting, the French president visited riot-hit areas to assess the damage.
La journée du 1er décembre 2018, dans le cadre du mouvement dit des Gilets jaunes, a été marquée dans la capitale par des violences d'une gravité sans précédent. Ces témoignages disent tous que jamais ces fonctionnaires n'avaient connu des faits aussi violents, aussi déterminés contre eux. Des jets de marteau, des billes en acier associées à des frondes, des engins utilisés pour le jardinage, des houes, projetés ou contentes de projeter sur les fonctionnaires, des gros boulons projetés sur eux, on a des photos, des aérosols associés à des dispositifs explosifs de type fumigène ou pétard lancés sur nos fonctionnaires.
The President Emmanuel Macron has also inspected the Arc de Triomphe after one of France's most revered monuments was vandalized by rioters. According to the police, more than 100 people were injured in the clashes, including 23 security personnel, while more than 400 arrests have been made. The Yellow Vest protesters, so called because of the jackets they wear, went on a rampage on Saturday. Buildings and vehicles were torched and one of France's most revered monuments stormed and vandalized. The protests were initially conceived in response to rising fuel prices and lowering standards of living because of the policies introduced by the French President Macron. Ambulance drivers protested near the French National Assembly in Paris to protest against the working conditions. The protesters also called for withdrawal of the Article 80 of the Finance Act on Social Security. And I'm joined by Elena Casas-Montanez, WION's correspondent from Paris. Thank you for joining me from Paris on this issue. What really explains the eruption of this violence, and for many political observers in France to compare it with what happened in 1968? And is that comparison correct?
Well, it's complicated. It's important to distinguish what we can call professional troublemakers, people from extreme far left and far right groups, mostly far right, who had clearly come out onto the Champs-Élysées on Saturday to cause trouble and who were armed and had the intention of doing so, from the vast majority of yellow vest protesters who, as you were saying, started as a protest against a specific rise in taxes on diesel, which is due to come in on the 1st of January, and have become a lightning rod for a whole range of grievances about the cost of living. If you look, though, at the people who've been arrested, 412 of them in Paris on Saturday, the vast majority of them don't have previous convictions for political violence. They aren't known to belong to any extremist group, and most had come from outside Paris. Most, the police tell us, were middle-aged men, as opposed to younger people who you might normally expect to be involved in extremist political movements. So what that tells us, really, and what it was clear to see on the streets on Saturday as well, is that quite a number of normal people, or people who aren't previously politically radicalized in any sense, have started to use this as an excuse to attack the police, to become violent. There was certainly a sort of group mentality on Saturday where the violence of some was encouraging others to also attack the police. And I think what this demonstrates is a widespread sentiment, perhaps more widespread than many people in Paris or in the political commentariat had realised, a widespread sentiment of rejection of the government, of rejection of the government's policies in general, so not necessarily specifically the figure of President Macron or any specific policies, but what a lot of the people that we were speaking to regard as policies that they don't believe have changed over the last several decades and over several different presidents, and a general feeling that they have, especially people who live in small towns and in the countryside, that the government is only ruling for people in big cities and that it's ignoring them.
Elena, very quickly, are we supposed to say that it was a little bit organized rather than spontaneous? Is that the crux of the matter?
Absolutely not. This is very much not an organised protest movement. It was organised spontaneously on social media and has since spiralled. That was clear everywhere on Saturday, that it's not in any sense organised. The government is now trying to organise a dialogue with people who call themselves spokespeople of the Yellow Vests. There's a group of 8 who were appointed last week and who will be meeting the Prime Minister tomorrow afternoon. But it's not really clear if their viewpoints will be considered representative or legitimate by the other protesters, because the movement doesn't have a clear agenda, and really what do the Yellow Vests want is a difficult question to answer, because the answer is different depending on which protester you ask. It's different for everyone.
Thank you, Elena. Thank you for joining us from Paris.